At this point, we will take, public comment. If you give me 1 second, I mislaid my notes. It's all right. We'll survive. If you could, please, if you would like to provide public comment on, sorry, folks. My apologies. All right. Okay, I'm going to improv. If you could, please, at this point, public comment will be on the any matters that are not on the agenda for this evening. So we are only able to take public comment for matters that are not on the agenda at this point. I will give you a moment to raise your hand if you would like to do public comment. You will have 3 minutes. And I'm waiting. So you will have 3 minutes to do your comment. I do not see anyone. Give you about another 30 seconds or so. All right. Given that I do not see anyone who would like to do public comment, let's move on to new business. Or I'm sorry, the first 2 items on the agenda, which are the fiscal year budget update, fiscal year 21 budget update, and the school learning progress model. We will actually do both of those items together. And then immediately after that, we will take public comment on both of those. And again, at that point, after those, you can raise your hand and we will bring you over on video. And you can make public comment on both of those items. Okay, so Michael, do you want to hit budget update?
Yes. Are we going to do the initial budget, or do you want me just?
No, that's FY21. Yeah, Madam Chair, we don't have any other updates other than what we presented to last meeting. We are working with the town now. They are reconciling all of their CARES Act and going through all of that. So we don't have anything other than the spreadsheet that Michael had shared with you this time.
All right. So we'll okay. So the next item then will be the school learning model progress, which we've had a lot of news on.
Sure. So just a few updates on that. So first one, looking forward to bringing our special education students back that are on academic IEPs right now. So we're looking at right now 162 students that are confirmed to return on January 4th for 4 days a week. I know that Mary's been working really hard on that and working closely with the parents to coordinate transportation and other issues that are associated with that. Principals have done a great job with that. So we're really excited to have additional 162 students returning in January for that. Missy has started reaching out to kindergarten parents again. She and I are meeting tomorrow. And we're looking at, again, trying to do that 4 full day model for our kindergarten students. So she has started that process, reaching out to parents. And as you remember, last time we were just short by, I think, 13 or 14 kids. But we're coming up with different plans on how we might get around that particular issue if that is to come again. So more info on that at our next meeting. And I know that Missy's working really hard to make that happen. 2 things that we're looking forward to in January. One is we'd like to start the Wednesday, bringing 1 cohort in on Wednesday and stop doing the fully remote Wednesday. So we're looking at providing synchronous instruction for the students that are home that day and bringing 1 cohort in and alternating that Wednesday, every other Wednesday. So again, we're going to begin negotiations again with the Teachers Association, and that will be one thing that we bring up. But we think that's an important thing to get another full day in. But as I said at the last meeting, we're really committed to making sure that's a synchronous time, because if not, then that just creates another remote day for students and families, and we're not looking to do that. So
Jeff, you're saying if the cohort that's not in school who's at home will be zooming into the classroom.
So yeah, there'll be synchronous learning going on for the kids that are at home. That's our intent, because we feel like, as I said, that it makes sense to do that instead of adding another remote day for both students and families. So that would be something that we're looking at doing in January. And then, of course, I know that I sent you information on the new regulations that DESE had voted on Tuesday. And I sent an email out to parents on Monday, I think Monday evening, about that, that it would require additional synchronous learning time for students in both a hybrid and in a fully remote model. So, I think that's a great opportunity for our kids to receive more of that great quality instruction that they get from Medfield teachers. So we're looking forward to that. That would we really be looking at, again, more synchronous learning for students that are at home. We're not looking to extend the existing day for in-person students. That kind of defeats the purpose of what the regulations are for. The regulations are really geared toward making sure that students at home have that connection to their classmates in school, and also have that direct instruction from teachers. So that's what we'd be looking at doing, having multiple synchronous opportunities for elementary students, and also looking at middle and high school as well. So again, can't get into too much detail, because I know we're going to hopefully start bargaining that with the Teachers Association, but that's good news for Medfield kids. And then we're looking forward to implementing that. The state regulations take effect on January 19th. So there's a really tight window for us to make sure that folks are on board, and also provide some additional training to make sure that we can do that effectively for our kids. So that's where we are. There's four items here that are all very promising, and looking forward to bringing additional in-person and synchronous learning to our kids. Happy to answer any questions that you have on that.
Does anybody on the committee have any comments or questions? Anything they'd like to clarify with Dr. Marston?
Sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit.
No problem.
Okay. Well, I think what I'm going to do now, if there are no other comments within the school committee, is
sorry. I suppose a comment is this is progress.
Right.
This can be so, and I'm pleased to hear this. So thank you.
Right. Yeah, I think that obviously we have been keeping up to date on this kind of throughout the week, and so as people are kind of joining or understanding what's happening within the district, it's not that we're simply just not surprised by the information. Dr. Marsden has done a very good job of kind of keeping us informed this week. So I really do look forward to the progress. And I know that our teachers will do absolutely the highest quality instruction. And I have been consistently amazed by how hard and how well they have worked and marshaled their resources for our kids. And I look forward to that continuing very much so. Okay, anyone else? No? Okay. Then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up public comment. So to reiterate, guidelines for public comment are just raise your hand if you would like to make a public comment about either one of these two specific agenda items. And before you comment, just state your name and your address, and you'll have about 3 minutes or up to 3 minutes to comment. Any one of us, any of the committee members can ask a clarifying question, but otherwise, all comments will be taken under advisement, and we will devote up to 15 minutes for this particular part of the public comment section. If you're unable to provide your comments during that time, or you would like to provide them in a different way, you may feel free to email us. on this issue or any other, frankly, at the scccchair@email.medfield.net. And all of those emails are forwarded without comment to the full committee. All right, so I'm going to wait about another 30 seconds for people to raise their hand if they would like to be brought over on video. Owen, do you see anyone? No? Okay.
I do not, no.
All right. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anyone. Okay. So if that is the case, we will move on to new business, which would be the initial fiscal year 22 budget. And Dr. Marsden and Michael, if you would like to take it away.
Sure, Madam Chair. Thank you. Michael's going to share a screen and we're going to go through a short presentation regarding the FY22 budget. As you recall, those of you that have been on the committee, you know that this initial budget really is just the draft of the first pass of our FY22. There's not a lot of backup information that goes along with it. That comes after the public hearing, which we put all that online. So nothing new in my 8 years here. We typically do an initial budget presentation, get the numbers out, have conversations with the warrant committee. You guys give me feedback. We provide a public hearing usually at the end of January. And when we provide that public hearing, up to that point, it's the superintendent's budget. It then becomes your budget if you vote to approve that at that meeting. And then we have all the other meetings with the town and warrant committee as we go through. So I'll go through this presentation and then we're happy to answer any questions that you may have going through it. All right, Michael.
Jeff, can you see my screen?
I can, yep.
Okay.
Yep, you can change it. Thank you.
Yep.
So our budget process to date, the principals and department chairs have developed their budget. So we really try to put it back on them to really give us a needs-based budget. We start every year as zeros-based. We don't just add a percentage onto our budget each year. So the principals and department chairs do all of that work. And then they meet with Michael and I, and we go through their request. I have to tell you, we probably had 20-something meetings in the last couple of weeks, and they were probably the shortest budget meetings we've had to date because the message we got from the town was that we really have to come in right around level funding of FY21. So although there was a wish list and wants that principals and department heads have, we really just can't put them in our budget this year. So you'll see as we go along, you're used to seeing longer lists of things that are in the budget. It's just not going to happen this year. So warrant committee held the Zoom meeting for department heads and communicated those expectations. Michael and I developed that budget. And again, as I said before, just a process reminder for those folks who may not be familiar with what we do with a budget. This really is the initial first pass draft. This is all the information that we get from the department chairs and the principals. We put it all together and with our payroll and everything else, and we build it from that way. And then our public hearing, as I said earlier, becomes the superintendent recommended budget, then becomes a school committee budget after, and if they choose to vote that at that meeting. I think this year it's the 21st of January, which is a week earlier than it has been the last couple of years. So as you know, we used Medfield 2021 as our driving document for the last almost 5 years. So many of the items in Medfield 2021 have direct budget implications. So goal number one is that we're committed to a collaborative learning culture and continuous improvement for our students and staff. So I guess one of the biggest things that we're looking at doing this year, especially after the FY21 process, is to really maintain our current staffing. As you know, we went through that painful process in June of reducing staff members, reducing programs. And we want to try to avoid that as much as we can this year. Given the math that we're given to work with, I'm not sure that's going to be possible. We want to continue our commitment to professional development. As you know, the professional development, especially for our teachers, is in 3 buckets. So we have our college reimbursement. So we want highly educated teachers. They take courses, we reimburse a certain amount of that. We also have research and development, which we do every summer. This summer was kind of an off year for that, but we typically have R&D in which our teachers work on great projects that they want to do in school, work on revising curricula, all of that. So that's another part of the professional development R&D that's really important. And then we have conference and travel. So that's an area where if there's a conference going on or something to that effect, teachers can go to that, or we have speakers come in with that money. Obviously this year with everything remote, it's been limited. I think you skipped ahead, Michael. It's been limited, so we haven't really had the opportunity to do that this year. So we also want to maintain and expand and improve our technologies and infrastructure. I think really an important piece of that is keeping up with the technology that we've invested in over the years. And there is a end of life for all of these technologies, and just making sure that we continue to improve those and reinvest in them. Our second goal, committed to support and developing the health, social, and emotional well-being of our students and staff. So again, maintaining current staff is really important, obviously, for the social, emotional health of our students and staff. Always try to highlight the wellness that we do, a great wellness department, and make sure that our kids have many opportunities around wellness. And the RISE programs, for those of you that don't know, the RISE program is something that we started a few years ago, and it's really a place at the high school where kids are coming out of transition, whether it's a hospitalization for anything. It's a safe place for them to work and transition before they go back into their regular schedule. So that's something that's really important. We've had incredible success with that program over the last 4 years. We want to promote the collaboration with outside agencies. I think we've really done a good job working with outside agencies around interface, and now with a great partnership with MCAP and the outreach, the town outreach program has been really successful. So those kinds of things are really important to us as a school district to make sure that we keep those collaboration and those relationships alive.
Jeff, just one question. I'm assuming the SEL, I mean, you call out the RISE and the wellness. I mean, the SEL program is all maintained as well.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, SEL task force, all that, and making sure that whatever we've done it all the way through K to 12, or pre-K to 12, that we ensure that those programs still stay in place. Goal number 3, committed to developing the whole child. I think our special education staffing has been a point of emphasis over the last 3 years, and we've done a really good job with that. We have really looked at restructuring and making sure that what we have in place is our best model to serve kids. So we've had a couple of different machinations of that, and that's really worked out well. Mary and her staff have done a great job with that. And then maintain and enhance those opportunities for students outside the classroom. So really providing opportunities for kids, not just in the 4 walls of the classroom, but making sure extracurriculars and all of the other things that make the whole child and make a well-rounded student are always there and supported for our kids. One example of that, if you know, in the last contract, we looked at redoing all the stipends for teachers that are involved in all the various opportunities for kids outside of school, whether they're a advisor for a particular grade level, or if they're a coach, or if they do music ensemble. All of that is incorporated into that, and we've done a really good job, I think, making sure that folks are compensated, and that's a priority for our kids. Goal number 4 is committed to and contributing to a vibrant community. Looking at appropriate resource allocation across schools and department. And that was something, if you remember, when we first started that whole process 5 years ago of developing our strategic plan, that wasn't always the case. And we had some imbalances in different schools, and there were areas that were funded more than others. So we've really done a really good job, I think, to try to make sure that was balanced, and the allocation across the schools was something that was a real priority for us going forward. Michael? Number 5, which I know has taken up a lot of time, both publicly and the work of all of our staff, is number 5, which is committed to the continued investments in facilities and equipment to optimize student learning. And I would say that the Dale Street project is probably the one that I'm most, I'm talking about the most, and the work that we've done with that over the last few years, finally getting into the pipeline of MSBA and going through that process has been really important for us. Also, having that director of facilities position that we share with the town is really important. Amy Colleran is a wonderful employee, a great person to have, and has a wide range of experience as an architect to help us out with any of our facilities issues. She was incredible this summer as working with Michael to get our our schools ready to be opened with all the different regulations that we had to adhere to reopen schools. Again, that resource allocation for buildings is really important. And then technology infrastructure, it really is critical for us to keep on top of that so we don't have issues in the future. Michael. So some of the assumptions that we made developing this budget, the first bullet I think is probably the most important one out of all. We are assuming that we're back to school full in-person model when we develop this budget. We're assuming that when September comes, we're there, we're in full person, and there may be some restrictions, but we're not in a hybrid or remote model. We are in person. Our federal entitlement grants will be level funded. So this is going to be interesting to see how this pans out in terms of the new administration. So, there really wasn't an emphasis the last 4 years on public education unless you were a charter school. So I think that this is going to be interesting to see what the new administration does with the federal entitlement grants that we use to part of that $3 million outside of the budget each year that we do to support our school district and hire folks. Chapter 70, which is that money that the state gives us as part of the our assessment will be level funded. So you know that in the FY21 budget, one of the issues that came out of that was that we made the assumption, as most people did, is that would be cut at least 10%. And it was just recently, within the last 6 weeks or so, approved, and it was level funded. So that was additional funding that goes directly to the town, and then they allocate that for schools. So we're assuming that that's going to be level funded again for this year. Continuation of our tuition-based programs, which we know is our preschool program, our full day kindergarten, which at this point is really, those numbers are really taking a hit in terms of our hybrid model. So we are making the assumption that we are back in full and that those tuition-based programs are running at full capacity. And circuit breaker, which is the money that we get from the state that offsets our special education costs. The statute has that at 72%. Typically, we've seen it from 42 to 72% and everywhere in between. So we're making the assumption in this particular budget rendition that it's going to be funded at 70%. So typical budget drivers that we have each year, I think, any school district's going to have, 76 to 82%, give or take, anywhere around there. Their costs in their budget are going to be instructional and personnel costs. That's no secret. It's not a Medfield thing. It's in every school district in Massachusetts thing. That's what the numbers typically are. So we're no different there. So this budget driver, the collective bargaining agreements, and then looking at our contracts, our transportation, which later in the meeting will be asking you to vote to approve. Transportation is a big cost to Medfield. As you know, we do not charge any bus fees to our parents and our kids. So that is all in our budget. There is no offsets that we have like a lot of other districts do. Our special education transportation with Accept, that we've done some creative stuff around looking at transportation with Millis and working with them on transportation and trying to get our best costs for from the Accept Collaborative. As you know, I'm on the board there, and as you know, a couple of years, it was last year or the year before, where we had issues with Framingham pulling out of the collaborative transportation and then making everyone else's costs rise. So I think that we're going to be in a better position with Accept Collaborative in terms of their transportation, but we'll know that in January or February, but it's too soon to get a definite number from them right now. Special education, in-district positions, out-of-district placements, and program development. Again, no different than any other district. That's always a budget driver. Our professional development, which I spoke about previously, we want to keep that commitment to our teacher and administrator quality around professional development, making sure that we are able to offer, whether it's PD time or R&D projects, those kinds of things that are important to us as a school district. And then although it doesn't really fit into our budget, health insurance costs are always an issue for every district. So if you're a regional school district like Dover-Sherburne, your health insurance costs are embedded into your regular budget. But town-based school districts like Medfield or Westwood or Millis or Walpole, they all appear on the town side. So school employees, their health insurance appears on the town budget. So even though it doesn't appear on our side, it certainly impacts our budget because it could impact what the town can allocate for our operating budget. So looking at FY22, our FY21 approved budget was $36,877,290. Our initial budget going through, as I said previously, how we did this with the meetings and the input from principals, department chairs, et cetera, is $38,315,504, or a change in budget of 1.4 million, percentage increase of 3.9%. So certainly it is above what the town is expecting at this point. And as we do every year, typically the initial one is our largest number that we have, because it's just that first pass. But I just need to tell you that it's going to be difficult for us to get to a 0 or 1% without making major changes in our organization. So I think that's something that you need to know, even though we're months away from town meeting. It's a really important factor as we go forward. So we talk about, and typically you've seen this particular slide where it's a lot longer list and the type is a lot smaller, because there's a lot of things that the budget does, whether it's the initial budget or if it's the one that you see at the public hearing. You'll see this only has 5 bullet points of what this budget does. It maintains our current staff and programs. So that's critical to what we have and what we see right in front of us. It does not, just to be clear, when we say current staff, it does not include the additional staff that we've hired to open up in a hybrid model. Those positions are not included in this because, as I told you, the assumption in the beginning was we're back in full. It includes steps and lanes and longevity and increases to units A and B. So as we talked about before, the teacher salary schedule, a teacher will get additional increase for the step, so additional year of teaching. And depending on what level of degree the step can either freeze at, say, 12 or 13 or 15, or it can keep going up and up and up. So you can usually say that the first 10, 11, 12, 13 years of a teacher's career in a particular district, they're going to get an automatic step with an increase there. So lanes are the payment schedule going vertically. So when a teacher achieves an additional, whether it's college credits or an additional degree, any of those, they move horizontally on the pay scale. So I would say that, one of the things that surprised us when we built this budget this year is the amount of teachers that moved horizontal. And we're not going to complain. We want a highly educated teaching force. I mean, that's important. We want lifelong learners, but it was a little bit higher than we've had in previous years. So that's going to impact our number. So longevity is another contractual bonus that teachers get based on their years of service. So when they have a year of service and they hit certain points, they'll get an additional bonus for longevity. And then, of course, the increases are typically called the COLA, or cost of living increase, to both units A and B. So unit A is the teachers, unit B is our teaching assistants. It also funds all of our collective bargaining agreements with secretaries, custodians, and food service. It level funds our non-personnel lines, and this is really important. So we reduced our non-personnel lines last year, and now we're level funding them. So it's like a second hit, right? It's a hit in FY21 and a hit again in FY22. And then it also funds our next strategic plan. So we are looking at doing that in FY22 as we finish up our Medfield 2021 and look at the next 5 years of our strategic plan and going through that process. So it's not a lot. Usually see a lot more items on there for what this budget does, and it's really basic. What you see is what you get in terms of level service. No added positions, no added programs in this budget. So as we know, the budget process will continue. We have upcoming school committee meetings where this will be an agenda item when we discuss any changes or anything that you would like me to change in the budget or add to the budget. We have meetings with the warrant committee and town officials. I think we have a meeting with the warrant committee next Tuesday night that we just added to our schedule this afternoon. And there'll be other meetings with town officials as well. Public hearing is at the school committee meeting on the 21st. And as I said earlier, it's a week earlier than it typically is. We usually have it the last week in January, but by town charter, we need to submit by the last day of January our entire budget to the town. So that's why we have the public hearing at that point. And then as of now, annual town meeting is May 3rd, but we'll see where we are in terms of the virus and in the pandemic and see whether or not there's any changes to whether or not we can have that many people in one space. So we'll see. But right now, that's where it's scheduled for. And then just our information, you always have I sent it out a zillion times to parents, my Twitter, if you want to contact me that way. If you want to go on the App Store or the Google Play, you can get our app, the Medfield Public Schools app, which has information on there. And it's a nice way to look at our website on your phone. And you get direct messages from me or push notifications. So that's our phone number, our fax, website, it's all there. So anytime anyone has a question, please make sure they reach out to us about the budget. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Happy to answer questions.
Then I would open it up to the committee if you have comments or questions about the budget. Anything that strikes you in particular, aside from the dire nature, or even if you want to comment on that or anything else, anyone?
I think we were all expecting this, but it seems more real now. And I loved it. It was in years past, Chris Morrison would always ask, if you could add something to the budget, what would be your top few things that you would want added to the budget? I know it won't happen, but it's also good to know that, what would it be?
So I think the first thing that if I could add anything in there, I would add another school adjustment counselor. So right now, Russ is working between two buildings, the middle school and the high school, and it's just really unmanageable. I think that would be my first addition in this budget, is to make sure we have another school adjustment counselor at the middle school or the elementary and middle school level. I know we've done a really good job in the past 3 to 4 years adding guidance at the elementary. We didn't have any guidance at all when I got here, and that was something that was really lacking. And we did a really good job as a school committee to approve that, and the town supporting those budgets. So I think I'd look in that direction. I think we always need support for our kids there. And then looking at additional specialists that could, work with students in either mathematics or language arts at the elementary level. We don't have a coordinator for mathematics at the elementary level. We do have that for language arts. And I know, one of the biggest challenge of being an elementary teacher is that you teach everything and you're not departmentalized. And it's great to have another person that a math coach, so to speak, that could come in and work with you as a classroom teacher and support the work that you're doing. I think that's something that, again, I don't want to compare, but most districts have that at the elementary level now. We've never had that. So I think something like that, just supportive positions. And if we had more room, I think we'd probably want to look at adding additional teachers in certain grade levels to bring the numbers down, but we don't have the space to do that at this, even in full. So we have a big group going through now. That current 5th grade group is a big group. But if you look at the other levels, the current 6th, 7th, and 8th are fairly, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders are smaller grades that are going through. If you remember years ago, I don't know when it was, 3 or 4 years ago, when we were looking at reducing staff at the middle school because of that low group, and you guys had voted and pushed us in a different direction to make sure that we kept those people, and we did. And in that, the byproduct of that is having really small class sizes in the middle school, and now that's filtering up to the high school. So, I think those are the main ones I would do. But if I had to pick one out of anything, it would be another school adjustment counselor for the middle school, high school level.
Russ has been a godsend to many families.
Absolutely. And I don't want to be in a situation where he's burnt out. So we need to really consider that, if not this year, next year. The other piece that, I didn't mention during the presentation is that the game changer in all this is if there's a second stimulus that goes to schools. So
that's what I was going to ask.
If we end up getting a stimulus package that's similar to 08 and 09, we're going to be in really good shape. We'll be, if it's allocated that way and it goes directly to the schools, we're going to be in really good shape. If it goes to the state and they allocate it based on the Title I mechanism, we're not going to be in good shape. We'll get minimum because of our Title I number. So I don't know. There's talk about it happening both ways, and we don't know until January, February, what that's going to look like. But if it's done the way it was in 08 and 09, will be, it will not be doom and gloom as this presentation is showing.
Yeah, Jeff, that's what I was going to ask you, if there was, not that we wanted to pin our hopes on it, but if there was a chance that something was going to come down with the new administration. And I assume that, I think it's in January that Denise Garlick usually does her.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so I'm hoping that she might have more information to share, what's at the state level.
Right.
And so we can kind of wait in hopeful anticipation of maybe something happening that could maybe change this budget a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's important that the state level conversation is important, because not only do we get $6+ million in Chapter 70, but if they use that Title I mechanism like they did with the first amount of money that came out of the COVID, we get the bare minimum. Like Medfield, Westwood, Dover, we get the bare minimum, and it's helpful. Every cent is helpful, but it's not the windfall that other places get. And if they use more of the Chapter 70 calculation to give us additional money, that would be much better for Medfield going forward.
I was actually going to ask about what would you think of the prospects of inviting Representative Garlick to a school committee meeting, or to kind of talk to us a little bit about the Ways and Means process in general across the state, what educational funding looks like, where the new formula that was passed, but does not look as though it is being enacted at this point, stands, and where we see that going. I understand that state revenues at this point look as though they're going to be much worse, but again, we don't know. There's so many things we don't know.
Right.
And I don't know that we've ever invited Denise to one of our school committee meetings, but I think it would be very helpful for people to kind of understand what school funding is like at the state level. We
That's
don't.
a good idea.
Yeah.
And Denise, she's great. She'll do that in a heartbeat.
Okay.
So,
Maybe we should, you and I can talk about a date that would be the most appropriate
sure.
to invite her. January 7th is a little fast, and I think we're going to end up devoting some serious time to the January 21st public hearing for the budget. But
Right.
Obviously, this is something that we need to keep our fingers on, because unfortunately, because we do have to submit a budget so early, and literally, within barely enough time for the inauguration confetti, which will not be there this year, to get cleaned up. I think that we have to try to remain as flexible as we possibly can, plan for the worst, but hope for the best.
Sure.
And enroll the town in helping us achieve that too. I mean, we do submit our budget much earlier than many other towns do.
Much
And
earlier.
I think we can kind of see that even this year, it seriously kind of dinged our ability to be flexible, and our ability to make up for a lot of operational costs that we're going to end up having to take on. And the town is being wonderful about going back and hopefully approving those expenses at the end of the year. But as you've said, we would not be in this position if we had been able to plan our budget later.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I think
it's the timing thing. The other piece too, I want to just remind you, at the January 7th meeting, I'll have the Student Opportunities Act that I'm required to send in. It's been delayed, and we need to send it in by the middle of January. So the Student Opportunities Act was that additional funding
Right.
that was supposed to come in FY21, which again, we're not going to see much of it. It was, again, it was the standard, it was $35 a student, I think. So we need to kind of just go through that process and submit that, but I can't submit that until you vote on that. So that will be on the agenda for the 7th.
okay, thanks.
just one comment. It's interesting that, and Anna, you asked one of the questions I was going to ask, but I was also going to say, just thinking of what the pandemic's done to the kids and the mental health, like my head immediately goes, gee, that if there is a time, that we were to ask a little more, that's the category I would think makes sense, you know, and Jeff, the fact that you're saying, you know, another adjustment counselor, that's the area. So that's where I would think a little more like, hey, you don't get it if you don't ask for it.
Right.
You know, I mean, those are areas that there's just, I think the entire town, there is some uniqueness to this situation that.
So would that be something that before, and you don't have to tell me now, you can tell me in January, but is that something you'd like me to put into the next budget when we do the public hearing, that position?
Yes. Please.
I would. I mean, I was going to go in that direction. I'm not just saying it, but it was interesting that you answered Anna Mae's question. I was going to make that suggestion anyways. And I'm not, others on the committee might say, hey, I'd rather somewhere else, but it just seems.
I would gladly do that.
Please.
Yeah,
This is also not an either or proposition. I would fully, being a social worker myself, I would fully support having an additional adjustment counselor. But one of the things that I think that we were realizing before the pandemic hit, and then now throughout the entire pandemic, is how much central office needs more support. And Dr. Marsden would never ask for it himself. And I know that. And he, but I believe the central office needs support in terms of managing communications, in terms of a lot of kind of basic administrative work that, quite frankly, Dr. Marsden and Dr. Powers and Ms. Brule and people who are tasked with really delivering and should be spending their time specifically around student learning are pulled away for these kind of administrative issues that should not be theirs. And I know that Jeff can be uncomfortable with that, because I know over the last 4 years and even before that we have always put our budget specifically towards people in front of students. But I'm concerned that the amount of time we spend on this, or that everybody at the central office who is pulled towards these kind of fires and kind of immediate issues, ends up taking our time away from student learning. You know, that it's, there are only so many fires you can put out in a day, and yet school is all about fires. And so I know it is not realistic to necessarily put it into this year's budget, but it is one I think that we need to be thinking about in terms of having somebody who is truly an upper level kind of administrative manager to run these, kind of operationalize many of these things we would like to do, so that you can all focus very specifically on student learning all the time, and not, and obviously right now, you know, the pandemic provides us with blesses us with a new challenge about every 48 hours. And that will not necessarily continue. This is not the new normal. This is just what's happening now. But as things become more complex, as education is becoming more complex, as people's needs for kind of specific, constant, and cohesive information in the age of the internet, and where misinformation ends up derailing our goals for our children, I can definitely see that there is a place where we would need additional support. So maybe not this year, but maybe this year. I don't know. I might have to put that forward, because I think that we can't ignore it. We can't just say that we're just going to keep on pushing all of you harder and harder and harder. There's really, I am kind of consistently amazed by the people in the central office and their capacity to work harder, to find more than 24 hours in a day. But I also know that it is not sustainable. And I also know that we have to think about what happens in the long range, not just when we have the people that we have in the office right now. So that's been my concern for a while. And Jeff and you and I have talked about it. But I think it's important. It's an important point to at least continue bringing up.
You know, I hear you, Jess. I agree with what you said, but I would just, that would be hard pressed. That would be a hard sell.
This year, it would be very hard, but it is a
know?
can that we continue to kick down the road. And I think that we feel the repercussions of it a lot of the time.
But you know
too.
what? I think even having our communications workshop, that was a step in the right direction. You know, if we can kind of, you know, in the meantime, I would have a hard time selling that, you know.
Of course.
But I think there are, as we continue to reflect and refine, maybe there's some in-house things that we can help support. And, you know, because I do think you're right, but I can't see that. I mean, you know, if we're
Not the year,
no.
but if I don't
Yeah.
mention it, then it won't be there, right? If I don't
That's a-
mention it,
that's a
we won't
large
even think about it
district.
2 years later.
That's a large district luxury, you know, I think. You know, even when I was in Newton, we
manager?
had one for
Somebody
a
who can,
communications. Yeah, we had
no.
one. for
I
about
said that it's a part of the communications, and that's not what I was actually talking about. But
Oh, okay.
this is really truly an administrative manager, somebody who takes the day-to-day kind of routine email information
Like an office
seeking,
manager.
better than an office, not better, yeah, more skilled than an office manager. These are things that people have, and I think that it's worthy of looking into. And maybe it's part of what we want to investigate as we look at our next strategic planning, because that's a 5-year window. But I do think that it's, I think we don't even know what we don't know about that right now. So,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
I appreciate that. It wouldn't make my top 100 right now. I mean,
I know it wouldn't, but that's kind of sometimes why you have a school committee. I wouldn't put it in our top 100 right now either. But I do think that it's progressively becoming more important to support our kids in a way that it seems peripheral, but may actually be pretty important. So I felt like I needed to say my part about that, because I think that what we are asking our central office to do right now is incredibly difficult. And I think that because you are not necessarily always forward facing, all of you in the central office, people don't see it as much, but we have. So that is my piece. And otherwise, I know right now it looks like a pretty dire year. Anyone else have any comments about this right now on the committee? And then I'll open it to public comment. Anyone? Okay. All right. So now I will open the floor to public comment. Again, please raise your hand if you would like to be brought over on video to speak about the budget and Dr. Marsden's budget presentation. We'll wait a minute or so for people to indicate that they are interested. I have to tell you, this is the most quiet I have
Don't
had
jinx
in a
it.
very long time. Mhm. Oh no.
Anna has a few things to say. Do you have some stuff?
Anna-
You sure?
Hannah is actually appearing somewhat ghost-like. It's a strange image. All right. If no
You
one
have lots
has a
of comments
comment
before the meeting.
at this point that they would like to make about the budget presentation, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is, and thank you, Dr. Marsden, I very much appreciate it. And I appreciate your hard work on this. The next item on the agenda is the MASC MCAS resolution, which we've also partnered with Medfield Public Schools assessment measures. And the reason that, I'll just open briefly. The reason that I put the assessment measures on the agenda is that we were asked by by the MTA, the Medfield Teachers Union, to consider the MCAS resolution put forward by the Mass Association of School Committees. And I will read it and talk about it later, and we can discuss it after this. But it made me realize that many of our parents and the community don't necessarily know the amount, the number, and the kind of assessments that we do regularly with our children. So frequently MCAS becomes kind of a baseline standard, and I think people misunderstand that MCAS is the only assessment that we do for our kids. So I wanted to have Dr. Power kind of talk about what assessments we do kind of across the district, what's our kind of schedule around that, and kind of give us a picture on how we understand each child in their learning process outside of MCAS, and then give us a little bit of kind of information around how the district might use MCAS when we do have it and in kind of a normal year. Because I think that there's a lot of discussion right now at the state level and a lot of misunderstanding around MCAS versus versus the impact MCAS has on many different stakeholders within the state. So Christine, I'm going to hand this to you. Unless Dr. Marsden, you would like to make any comment first, or sorry, didn't realize you were taking a water break.
No, just grabbing the water. No,
right.
Christine's all set. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Christine. I appreciate it. Take it away.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We're speaking one of my favorite things, which is assessment. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment so I can share my PowerPoint. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to center tonight's talk on a particular question, and that is, how do we know if our students are meeting standards? And that is a pretty straightforward, but also a complex question to discuss. And I'll be walking through that step by step today. Now, keep in mind, assessment takes many different forms, and teachers assess their students each and every day, both informally and formally, through formative assessments, check-ins, looking even as for a student's response, quick little quizzes, things like that, or more formal or summative assessments. And those assessments, again, happen each and every day. But I'm going to be speaking about more large-scale, more standardized assessments. And the examples here are just a few of the ones that are happening in the district as we speak. And I'll walk through the different assessments that are being used and how they're used within our district. So first, I'm going to focus on our elementary. And there's numbers of different assessments, but to start with, I'm going to focus on our reading assessments and really focus on Lexia Rapid. Now, Lexia Rapid is new for our district, and the reason why is we've used the BAS for many years, and that's something that is known by our teachers, and really it's something we have copious amounts of data. Jamie Callahan and her team, the reading specialists, do a fantastic job on administrating and also interpreting this data and working with our elementary teachers on that. What happened was with the pandemic, the BAS is not an assessment that is allowed to be administered remotely. So keeping in mind, not knowing how the year would unfold, and also keeping in mind that we do have students who are entirely remote, we decided as a district to switch to Lexia Rapid as a way to assess reading, and that's our screener, really multiple times through the year, 3 times through the year, that we assess our students' reading. And then from there, we pull data, and then we make a number of decisions from that and understanding. So for instance, we look at these type of data for longitudinal trends. looking at the standards, how students are doing against standards, and looking overall, that's by the grade, and how students are performing. But also it's used for individual student growth. And we look at the individual student and how they are performing and how they are meeting the standards that are set. So, and those are used for determinations for reading intervention, as well as special education, and as well as used for day-to-day instruction in terms of teachers use this information to really have an understanding of how their students are doing. Now that goes hand in hand with the Lexia Core 5. And again, this is a new product that we're using, and again, started using it. And the one thing I will say, and I have to say this over and over again, I really have to commend our elementary teachers who've really pivoted. This is a new assessment brought into the district, and they had to learn the assessment. They're also using the many different products. And so it was a challenge. The training has happened. They've been really using it and using it really well. So I want to really commend them for that. So the Lexia Core 5 goes hand in hand with that. And again, fall 2020 adoption. And it's standards-based reading supports that target skill gaps. So once the screener happens, once the Lexia Rapid occurs, at that point, that information is mapped onto the Core 5, where it provides very targeted supports for our students around certain standards in order to provide them supports. The students' use of these different activities and these skill activities are mapped and captured, and those data go back to this very impressive dashboard to help inform teachers on their students' progress across these standards. How Lexia calls it is an assessment without tests, because it's regular standards-based assessment that occurs over and over and over again, but it's not what you would think is a traditional pen and paper test. It's actually assessing students' comprehension, students' use of the understanding of the literacy standards through activities, through reading, through different things that are going on through the actual dashboard. The version that is used in the middle school is Lexia Power Up, and it's incredibly similar to the Core 5, again, adopted in fall of 2020. And the same sort of concepts. It's taking the baseline assessment data, identifying skills gaps, and then the student would work and to practice these particular skills, and the student's progress is mapped over time. Again, all of this is mapped onto standards-based, the standards and how well they are meeting grade level standards.
Christine, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
How does the BAST and Lexia track across time now that we've changed our assessments? Are we able to kind of, like Macintosh apple to Honeycrisp apple kind of compare, or is this two very different measures?
They are different measures. However, I will say that Jamie Callahan created something I call to the Rosetta Stone, right? It's how those data can speak to through Lexia scores, et cetera. How you can understand grade level comprehension. It's not a perfect equation. However, it is something that can be used to understand how students' performance have been done. But you pick up a really good point. Since we switched the instrument itself, it's that longitudinal data that we've been collecting for years and years has switched. And again, that was done, I wanted to say, because of the pandemic and making sure that we have that flexibility for testing.
Okay, great, thanks, sorry.
Nope.
Can I ask a question really quick while she did? So if I'm understanding this correctly, the Lexia program after the rapid, the first assessment is can be used daily as an exercise that the kids are doing, but it's continuously monitoring and assessing them and giving the information back into the teachers. So I guess my question then is, what then becomes the role of the teacher in this?
No, it's great. The reading specialists work with the teachers themselves. The teachers themselves have access to the dashboard so they can see how their students perform. And the reading specialists help the teachers interpret the data and also provide them with supports, and they talk about the data, and together they're developing and implementing lessons or doing targeted interventions, for instance, for reading intervention students based around those data.
Would this be typically used as like a homework assignment after a lesson, a direct or instruction lesson is given?
A variety of different ways, including but not exclusively as a homework assignment. That's one way that it could be definitely used.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So Power Up, the middle school version of the Core 5, again, works very similarly. And this goes hand in hand with the screener. Freckle, again, Freckle is a, switching, that was the predominantly our ELA. Or our reading assessments. And now I'm going to pivot a little bit to our math assessments. And I'm going to speak about a number of products that actually speak to each other as well. And that is a really powerful thing in terms of capturing and interpreting data. So looking specifically at math, Freckle is a product that we've had for a while, but we expanded its use within this year. And a lot of it is because of the power of that, and also just the pandemic itself. And it's interactive math assessments that are based, again, on standards. And students interact either in class as a homework, a variety of different ways. Within specific standards, they're assigned standards-based activities, standards-based assessments, little quizzes, little games. And at that point, their performance is mapped. And again, this information goes back to the teacher as well as the math interventionist, and they can interpret these data, identify how students are performing, and it also is used to help in special ed is also intervention students on what skills are strong, what skills are needing improvement. And so it's used in multiple different ways. We find for the developmental level of our youngest children that Freckle is age developmentally appropriate versus a more standardized test. And so it's been a good fit for our students for capturing these data, but doing it in a very developmentally appropriate way. Now that product, it goes hand in hand with our screener. So that information speaks directly to our more standardized elementary math screener, which is our Renaissance Star. Renaissance Star is used by a number of districts, including ours, and we've been using it for several years. So we have these data, we've been using it for a number of years. Again, 3 separate testing windows, fall, in the winter, and the spring. And these are, how do students perform based on against standards? And again, the information that's collected is to identify longitudinal trends. How are students doing in terms of their understanding of specific standards? And how are they doing over time? And how is that group versus other groups are doing as well? So it informs instruction directly, but also keep in mind that it is so fine-grained that it's actually used for individual student growth, used for identifying students for intervention and specific targeted interventions on certain standards or certain skills for math, as well as for special education. And the Freckle and Renaissance speak to each other. So the information that is captured within Freckle, which is used in younger grades, but also used in older grades as well, informs, and it goes to, and they speak to each other with the Renaissance math testing screening that happens 3 times a year.
So Freckle is feeding its results directly into your STAR instance.
Yeah, they definitely, it's really powerful in order to get constant assessment data that is not at these 3, not only at these 3 periods of time, but it's constant, it's iterative, it's informative, it's informing instruction on a regular basis. And
is that information, so the teachers, the Freckle information is going back to the teachers for just-in-time intervention?
Yeah.
And okay.
Interventionists, and also our interventionists who help, they capture these data they do the sweep and they do the testing itself. They help interpret the data and then work with our teachers directly in developing and implementing lessons. And our teachers do a great job using this information to inform creating powerful lessons, working with students one-on-one, and also working with their class in general. Now, those are just the big ones. There's a lot of other assessments that are done And this is to provide that fine-grained, nuanced feedback. And keep in mind that teachers use what they're familiar with, what they're comfortable with. And so there's the BAS, you notice that, because a number of our teachers have used it for years. And keep in mind that the BAS data could only be done in-house. It cannot be done remotely. However, there are teachers who are very comfortable with the BAS, who find that that provides another level of data beyond. And so teachers use a variety of different things, including some teachers are using BAS, the math benchmark assessments through our Envision math program is another example. Also things like reading A to Z, QRI, informal reading measurements, running records, in-text feedback. Again, this is now done, these different types of assessments are done by individual teachers to provide an additional layer and a different, another layer of nuance when they're developing and implementing lessons, when they're providing feedback to parents, for instance, for conferences or for report cards. Again, that is just that extra level to provide another data point on top of all the data that has already been collected.
Can I ask just for a definitional question for the folks out there in TV land? Running records and in-text feedback, can you explain that specifically in terms of what teachers are looking for at that point? Like
Yeah,
what are those terms actually mean?
It's actually sitting with students themselves and seeing with students, listening to them. And that's why it's very time consuming.
Right.
And sitting, listening and recording in terms of how they're performing, and then going back and going back and going back and revisiting.
Right. I think that sometimes parents don't know that a lot of the time when teachers are assessing kids, they really are assessing them very specifically one-on-one in context, right? That they're sitting next to them. It isn't all at this point simply data and, you know, like checking off boxes and reflecting back to a computer that then spits to them. That there's two very large kinds of, there's the kind of art, right? The art part of teaching. And then there's the very data-driven part, and that the two need to come together to be able to give a whole picture of a kid.
I loved how you phrased that. And it is keeping in mind that assessing a student is a really intricate and involved task. And it is not just simply taking a one-time data point, a one-time test, and assuming that is fact. It is one data point of many. And by giving you multiple examples, this shows the level of our teachers in terms of the depth that they're looking for feedback and different types of data points in order to really provide that picture of a child's progress. Right. Thank you for sharing that. Now, secondary is a little bit of a different thing. And that's because it's just the nature of it being more subject specific and just the structures of secondary schools. So in secondary, that standardized tests are not as ubiquitous. That happens, and that is typical. Instead, what teachers do in our district is focusing on teaching and learning, and really focusing on how are students performing in a variety of different ways. So it centers on the learning maps, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but really looking at the state standards, the framework standards. What are they? And then how are students demonstrating understanding of those? So it's really focusing and going deep into understanding all the different standards that are there, and then providing opportunities for students to demonstrate understanding for that. And so teachers are constantly talking about, and I talked to building principal, I talked to Nat Vaughn earlier, and talked about those Wednesday afternoons and how and just Wednesday opportunities and just multiple opportunities of teachers talking about curriculum, talking about assessments and how powerful it is. The development of common assessments, that has happened both in the middle and high school. The 1 to 2 week planning document, thinking about developing and implementing instruction around the same essential questions. So really thinking about what is the end goal of that unit, what is going to be assessed, and how are we going to get there. Vertical team meetings, having teachers within the same discipline meet and talk about students and how well they're performing. So if the 10th grade teacher is talking to the 9th grade teacher on a regular basis, how are they performing? What are they seeing? What are the students' strengths coming through? What are the areas of improvement? And then improving their practice that way. And of course, there are a few standardized exams, but again, keep in mind that these aren't universal and these data often come back later and they're data points, one of many, but keep in mind, it's not always something that is used universally in terms of not every child takes the AP or the PSAT, etc.
Can you just quickly talk about how the secondary assessments then guide differentiation within each specific classroom to each child and each subject matter? Because I think that, like we can see elementary assessment and see, okay, we've got this really granular kind of information on how they are learning the things they need to know to learn. But in the secondary schools, how do we then understand where our kids are, if they're having difficulties or if they need enhanced kind of instruction? How are we differentiating off of the data that we're receiving there? And this can be a quick nugget if you can, because I do know that we want to invite you back either in January or February to present on the standards-based research that you had been doing. But yeah. Quickly, if you could just let us know kind of where that gets informed.
Yeah, the collaboration. Oh no, absolutely. The collaboration that's been happening within departments, it's always been there, but it's been incredible this year. That teachers are looking closely at their curricula and really deciding on what is the essential question, what are the goals, and how are we going to assess? And so through those common assessments that are developed throughout the throughout the secondary schools, the Blake and the high school, of looking at once the students take the assessment, understanding how are students performing, and then adjusting practice in real time. Now, the collaboration happens within sections. It's also in between sections. So if you have, for instance, a high school class that has a honors C1 and C2 section, looking at specifically what are the instructional goals, and that is based on the standards, and how are we reaching those, and areas that are needed for support, perhaps for a particular class versus another, or what's an area that we need to go deeper. For instance, if it's a C1 or C2 class versus an honors or vice versa, where do we extend? And those discussions are happening. I can tell you, I've had opportunities of participating in vertical team meetings, for instance, also in curricular meetings, but those are really helmed by our department chairs of having those discussions, that what is the experience of a child in a class within a particular class, whether it's C1, C2, honors, etc. And then what are the types of assessments that are happening within.
Okay. All right, action steps.
I have kind of a follow-up on it though, and Jess, this is my question. How formal is it? Because eventually, part of this conversation, I know where it's going, but how do we know what's happening? At a grade level, for example, how is there any formal way to look at it?
Well,
number one, and then I'll group them. Then the second maybe, is there, outside of clearly things like teacher conferences or report cards, is there any way that this gets communicated out to parents?
Yeah, so they have built-in meeting time, both vertical time as well as just department time, and of that they have they keep their own records, as well as they interact with Robert and with Heather, and I interact with them as well, talking about these important things about curriculum instruction and assessment, etc. So we do look at that. And then in terms of informing parents, the learning maps are located on the website within the instruction innovation site of identifying where it's pretty powerful. If you go as a parent onto the site for K through 12, you'll be able to see what are the instructional goals, what is being taught, how is it assessed. And so as a parent, you'll see pretty much it'll give you either a time frame or, for instance, at the high school, The data that was collected for parents to use is what are the major assessments within that unit. So at that point, you know exactly, okay, my child's being assessed this way, and you'll have an understanding of what types of assessment, what is being done. And it also is meant to foster conversation with the parent and the child, and also to provide an opportunity for the parent to ask questions about that or look out for that assessment that comes in. For instance, if there's a particular project on a certain English unit, et cetera, they can identify. But all of that is located on our website. We wanted to make that really public for people, knowing that parents are partners with us in educating their children.
And I think that's one of those things that we could probably do a little bit better job publicizing those learning maps and that, so that's definitely a very good checkpoint. Thank you.
Well,
okay.
Real quick, and I'm going to talk about this because this is an example right here. So on the right-hand side is an example of those learning maps that I was just about to talk about. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that's happening, because that within the office this year, and that definitely feeds into and informs this larger discussion about assessment. So over time, but especially in this past fall, really taking an opportunity to looking at our curricula. And there's no discussion about assessment can happen without understanding the curricula that informs it. What are we assessing, right? And so in the fall, really I focused on two specific things. What standards must we meet, and how best can we meet them in light of the hybrid format? Really understanding that we're in a real unique time right now, but we still need to meet these standards. So the teachers have been phenomenal in really pouring in a lot of time, a lot of effort into creating these learning maps. And you'll see the example of the grade 2 learning map on the right. It's very visual and very interactive, but you'll see specifically, I know it's a little small, but it keeps a pacing guide as well in terms of, on the left-hand side, what are the major standards that are being addressed throughout the year. And then on the right is, when is that happening? And then at the bottom is the particular skills that are happening. So that is there, and it's not only covers the K-5 in this format. Within 612, that's where it gets subject specific, and each department, each class developed their own version of this to provide parents information on what are the major objectives, when approximately in the curriculum, what time of year, and what are some examples of assessments that are being done. So that was done in the fall, started in our fall professional development, October professional development, and then posted in there for everyone to see. And keep in mind that these existed in different formats because of the pandemic, and keeping in mind our hybrid format. These are addressing our current situation and our current structure as we speak. And they can be, and they're meant to be adaptable. If we can go full in, we can adapt and change. So besides that, I've been reviewing the MAS frameworks, looking at these and developing these learning maps, and then focusing on priority standards. And what priority standards are is taking the standards, that all of them, and looking at specific ones and what levers are needed, or what are the most important ones, the most important levers to propel learning, and which ones are ones that are covered perhaps elsewhere, or perhaps covered in another discipline, and identifying those. So you'll see here as an example of that information, that work was done in the fall, and we're continuing on in the spring and through the winter and the spring. On the right-hand side is an example of the 4th grade. It just as a screenshot of the type of work that's being done right now. And I have to commend the math interventionists for really thinking about this, because now we're looking at things vertically. And so we're taking each one of those standards, understanding of when they're being taught. And you'll see that last column, which is really key, is understanding that these standards, when are they being taught? And in many times, they're being spiraled up. So you'll see that first example representing data online and plots. It is being taught in 4th grade, but it's also being taught in 5th and 6th grade. And so really taking that nuance level, looking at standard by standard by standard, What is being taught when is it covered again? You'll see this example use the forward formula for perimeter and area for rectangles. It's covered again in 6th. We're looking at that level of nuance when we're looking at standards, so we can think about curriculum from going on through the spring and then beyond. We're looking at developing which standards are need to be prioritized to meet learning gaps, and using the information that's coming from our standardized tests to do that, so we can focus, and also to provide teachers long-term planning guides to inform curriculum development for years to come, knowing that there are areas that we cycle over and over again. There might be areas that are only covered once, and then also keeping in mind that with the pandemic and the way of instruction is, where do we need to focus on if there's any learning gaps that get picked up by our standardized test data. So all of that is happening now and will continue, but this is the work that is definitely coming out right now. And we're going to be working with the teachers directly on this in very early January in terms of rolling this information out and providing them, again, more information about the curriculum and the instruction based on the standardized tests, as well as our analysis of the curricula itself. And with that, I think this is my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it is.
Does anyone on the committee have specific questions about any of that? And then I want to kind of steer a little bit towards the role of MCAS across the district and across the lines here. And then also, Dr. Marston, if you could speak a little bit to the role of MCAS in other areas that are not student or grade specific to our district. Because I'd like to get into a little bit of discussion about the term of high stakes testing versus assessment. So Christina, could you let us talk a little bit about the role of MCAS in understanding where our kids are on a district level, like kind of where we look at that. Although it's almost unfair because you have not even been here a year in which we have had MCAS, except.
So I can talk a little bit about that. I know that one of the things that we've talked about at previous school committee meetings, and I think is probably the most important data point out of MCAS, is student growth data. You know, so that started a few years ago, in which DESE decided to do some really important dissection of the data and disaggregate a lot of data that we have and make sure that you can follow a kid from one grade level to another and then see how much growth has been made in a percentile. So with 50 percentile being average growth, and anything north or south of that is either less than average or more or above average. And it puts those kids into a cohort. So we've talked about this, I know, at lots of school committee meetings, but just so if we have Johnny, who scores at whatever number he scores on a scale score for MCAS in 3rd grade, he is put in a cohort of every kid in the state that scores that exact score. So whether that kid is in Medfield or Boston or Worcester or Millis or Westwood, those kids are all put in that same cohort. Then those children take it in 4th grade. They take MCAS in 4th grade. And then we take Johnny's score in Medfield when he's in that huge cohort of kids statewide, and we compare his score to that entire cohort, and then they calculate a student growth percentage off of that. To me, you know, that is probably the essence of really looking at why MCAS is it's a snapshot. It doesn't tell the whole story, but I believe that particular data point that DESE put out a few years ago now really tells a pretty good story of whether or not students are growing at a certain pace. Now, obviously, if someone scores at a very high rate in 3rd grade or 4th grade, they may not have a large student growth percentage because there isn't much more or much higher they can go in terms of their scaled score. But it tells a really good story of a district or a grade level, or even down to the classroom level, of what's happening in terms of student learning. So, you know, we've used it as a conversation piece, as a way to look at curricula and adjust it if we need to. It hasn't been used at any hammer, so to speak. It's really been more of having a conversation to see where people are at. So to me, that is the best part of MCAS, is getting that student growth data, which really doesn't start until 4th grade. There's no student growth data for 3rd grade because that's the first time the kids take the test.
And MCAS itself changed. This is also like a perfectly terrible time to have a pandemic, because MCAS itself changed pretty significantly. So we took the first year of the MCAS 2.0, and then we do not have another year's worth of data to be able to compare that. And the previous MCAS scores are essentially kind of apples to oranges. Is that?
Yeah, it is.
Characterizing that?
And don't forget, we had Park in the middle of that too, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we piloted Park as a district. We did that. I mean, that was really a decision that we made as a district, because we knew that the MCAS 2.0 was going to be based similar on, or at least around the same standards and the same type of questions that they would have in MCAS 2.0. So we wanted to give our kids an opportunity to do that. And that was important for us and our kids to try that out at different grade levels a few years ago. But now that we're, in MCAS 2.0, and I have to tell you, from what I'm understanding, and unless things change, it looks like, excuse me, that if MCAS is given this year in the spring for elementary and middle school grades, it's going to be used more as diagnostic. It's not going to be used in terms of school or district accountability. So the accountability piece is that DESE puts these particular benchmarks that you should be hitting, and they disaggregate that by student, whether it's, they do it by race, by whether the student's on a 504, IEP, et cetera. And they put all those benchmarks for you to hit. And then if you hit them or exceed them, they give you your accountability rating. If you meet them or don't exceed them, then your accountability rating is different. So that's
the high stakes part of what people are talking about.
So that's the high stakes part, and that's really a hangover from No Child Left Behind. So that's what that is. So that's the federal law of No Child Left Behind requires states to do that accountability piece, and that's why the state of Massachusetts Department of Ed cannot say no to MCAS unless there's a federal waiver. So they got a federal waiver this past year because of the pandemic, and Jeff Riley postponed or canceled MCAS for this past spring.
That would be Jeff Riley, not Jess Riley, just so.
Yes, right, exactly. Jeff Riley, Commissioner Jeff Riley. So the current education czar in the federal government, Betsy DeVos, said that she would not grant any waivers. Well, Betsy won't be around much longer, so there'll be a new person in there in January. So we're waiting to see, what's going to be happening, what will happen with that, whether or not there'll be a federal waiver granted to states if they so choose. My sense is there'll be a federal waiver, and Massachusetts will choose to do MCAS, but do it as a diagnostic, not as a high stakes. But that's, speculation on my point, but just based on the meetings we've had with the commissioner, I know that he feels strongly about getting some sort of diagnostic data in there from MCAS.
Okay. And the other question, go ahead, Leo, please.
Yeah, this question was Christine. Could you describe the process that teachers go through with some of the testing results, say on reading or math that you were describing, and how that information is utilized to provide an intervention or share or provide more challenging work to the student? Because what if the student is reading or performing above grade level, and do they test to go above grade level, or are they looking above grade level? Because I know it's it's always around on grade level, but we have many students so like my children happen to be strong in math compared to say their reading. So how are we differentiating that instruction based on some of those assessments, I guess, and describing that process?
Yeah, it's a big question.
Or are we working on that? Is that something we're working towards? I don't know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, no, really good question. And actually I had a conversation about that very topic just earlier this week. The tests are helmed generally by the interventionists, both the reading and or math, and it depends on the test itself. Sometimes the teachers themselves will help administer. Sometimes, for instance, Lexia has done a one-on-one with the younger ages. So that's done with the reading specialists themselves who are capturing these data. The data gets basically captured, and honestly, almost immediately the results are there. With reading, we have Jamie Callahan, who breaks that down and really looks at the trends, what are really specific, and she's focusing on reading, and then provides, really walks through with her reading interventionists within the buildings in terms of these are the areas that we should be looking at. And so looking at with her team in general, but also that information goes with the individual teacher and their walk through their class set in terms of how these information and how your students are doing on the individual student level. Now, in the similar process with math, they just don't have a Jamie. That it's done, and Jeff talked about this earlier in terms of there's no coordinator, no specific person, no department chair for that. So the individual math department, the math interventionists within their building will do the Renaissance testing. And at that point, things are captured. And again, the results are practically immediate. And then the reports will go to the teachers themselves. And then the interventionists will work with the teachers individually, helping them interpret and understand the data. Now, how does that translate to the classroom, specifically for instruction, is that the interventionists will work as a coach in a way, for instance, in math, that they will help develop and talk about these areas of needed growth or areas that students are doing particularly well, and help inform the essential question, the major topic for that, and especially in our current mode where it is their development processes, they work really collaboratively with them in terms of developing that instruction. But in terms of individuals, when students are identified as needing intervention, what they're doing is that they'll do they'll reach out to the building principals are definitely part of this process. They're informed, the parents are informed, and they are identified for specific interventions around particular skills. And at that point, that they either have pull in or push out or a variety of different interventions that are meant to address the learning gaps that are there. And that is done and the schedule is made. And again, through the multiple times of testing, we're looking at the growth and the progress of that child. Now to your final question in terms of if a child is performing above grade level. If that happens, if they identify that, what happens frequently in the conversation I had most recently was it was identified and it was discussed in a conference and with the parent identifying this, and also the interventionist itself will talk about ways to support that child, specifically with going above and beyond what is the standard and how to support that child who is there. And it's something that we need to definitely to focus and provide more support for. But those conversations, the conversations I had earlier this week was that about that specific topic and supporting this child who is testing above grade level and what could be done to sustain and support that.
Okay. And I am sorry, Christine, this is so rich and I appreciate it so much. And I think that what I'd really like to do is have you come back, kind of midwinter, February, March, when or February actually would be great. And then we can kind of talk a little bit about where, in the context of this, where our kids are in pacing at this point, where we're seeing things looking good, where we're seeing things not looking so hot. And also, I do want to make sure, I do know that you did such an amazing work on the SBR and that everything stopped. I want to make sure that we get you back and have kind of the Christine Power show.
I would love to for them.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. Does anybody else on the committee have questions for Christine now, or can I kind of quickly open this up to public comment? Anyone? All right. At this point, if you would like to make a public comment about our assessment measures, and then actually I will briefly talk about the MASC resolution. If anybody has any questions about the assessment measures, or comments about it, please feel free to raise your hand. While that is happening, we'll kind of get back to, I hate to leave things kind of just open on the agenda. And we had kind of spoken briefly about the MASC resolution on MCAS, which the MTA had come to us asking us to present it before the committee. And I think that in reading it, I thought that it was important for us to really have a conversation about what kind of assessments we do, and whether MCAS was its own game, and to kind of get a general picture of what we do as a district and whether this resolution really fit our district and our goals. And I know that all of you have read it within your packet, and we've had it in there for a couple of weeks. Is the resolution as it's written something that you would be interested on voting on today? Or do you think that this is not something that we necessarily want to bring before the committee, that it's not something that's a priority for us? I mean, it seems mostly like these things are completely out of our hands, that any kind of assessment that would be done with MCAS would be diagnostic and not necessarily tied to district or teacher performance at this point. So short of reading it and taking the time.
I'm more worried about gap analysis next year as a result of this year. So I really do not give a hoot about what the state wants to do with the MCAS. So I prefer not to waste any time on it.
Okay.
I concur too. I think it's kind of a moot point because what's going to happen is going to happen. And I honestly, the way that this is written for the moratorium on the next 3 years, I can't accept or support that, especially since we don't really know what's going to happen. I don't know if you want to vote for it, but I'd be fine leaving it.
I'd be perfectly fine to dismiss.
Yes.
The resolution in general, not in any way commenting on what I think was probably noble intent, but that it simply doesn't work for our district, and that it may actually be moot at this point. These are things that we do not have much control over, certainly for this year. Anna Mae, Tim, do you have any thoughts?
I agree with both Leo and Megan.
Okay. Tim, you're going to have to do the thing. Tim.
Yeah, I fully concur. I don't want to spend time. I think the value, it was a forcing function, even to begin this conversation we just had, is important. And
yeah, I think that's very much what I felt, that when I saw it, I looked at it and I read it, and then I realized that there were several kind of gaps in terms of language and an understanding around what MCAS does and then what we also do. So, okay, it looks as though there is not public comment after a great amount of time. So we are going to move on, and we will simply not vote on the resolution. And I think we are able to do that. We are not taking questions and answers today through the Q&A. I'm surprised that it hasn't been turned off. We'll remember that, but we only take questions through video. Oh, now I have 2 people raising their hands. Owen, can you, I'm unable to see their hands. I just see there's only 1.
There was a Carrie and Chris.
She's in.
Christine.
Yeah.
Carrie's
she was in.
no longer there.
Okay. All right.
Hi. It's Chris Potts. I just wanted to hear what Andrew had to say. That was all. I think it's helpful to have a student perspective on this particular topic.
Could you frame a question for me? Just
actually, I mean, Andrew, I think that what she is asking is if you have an opinion on the assessments.
No, I'm asking him if he has an opinion on a moratorium on MCAS with regard to the resolution.
I'm very happy to ask him that question, Chris, but this is very specifically for comments, and it's not a dialogue. A public comment is public comment. So do you have a specific comment you'd like to make about MCAS or assessment? And Chris?
No, I would just like to hear what are the student representative on the school committee has to say about this particular topic on the agenda.
Okay. I mean, I asked for comments when did you have anything in particular that, thank you, Chris. And is your comment over at this point? I mean,
It is. Thank
are you
you.
done?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll bite. Andrew,
No.
how
That's
much do you
okay.
like MCAS?
No,
It's the best 3 weeks of your life, isn't it?
I do not mind
honest.
MCAS at all. And I know like it obviously is extremely important for like a statewide diagnostic. And especially like, kind of with the perspective of applying to college and standardized testing as far as that goes, like I can see why, as much as I hate the SAT and the College Board and the ACT and all that stuff, I can see why it's so important because it really cuts through and puts everyone in a pretty level playing field. I know there's a lot of discrepancy in there, but it is like a pretty straightforward diagnostic in that. And especially I know at Medfield, we're a very competitive district. And like by the time I was a sophomore, I almost like rejoiced when MCAS time came because it was like a break in my week. I got to have like 2 days where it was just chill. I sit in a Chromebook and I read a nice little story and I type a little essay about it. And there we go. Like, so I know people
I feel like
really
the rigor
that.
there is really intense.
Yeah. But that's obviously not to say that it's
Your honesty is appreciated.
across all the other
You go uptown afterwards because you get out a little early, right? You go uptown and
yeah, I mean,
Get
like
pizza.
it was just nice because like I remember one year in like 5th grade, I had a summer reading book and I finished early, so I literally read an entire summer reading book in my 5th grade class, and I got some of my summer work out of the way. So, I mean, that's just obviously a very narrow perspective, but yeah.
Christine, I would put Andrew above grade level in 5th grade,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't leave it up to spare time and MCAS to challenge him. But
All right. So thank you, Andrew. And Andrew, I think you know at this point that you are not shy. And if you want to pipe up, you are as much a part of this committee as anyone. So thank you very much.
I guess with answers like that, we're going to ask him more often anyway.
I don't know about that. Okay. So the next thing that we need to move on to within the business of the district is, and thank you, Christine, that was, I know it went long, but I think it was a really valuable conversation. And I think it's also a piece of the video that we can really point people towards when they are concerned about how we do assessment and kind of what these things mean this year. Okay. So thank you so much. I
Thank you,
appreciate your overtime again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is mundane but very important, which is the transportation bid.
Madam Chair, thank you. So on Monday, we had our bid opening as we had discussed at our last meeting when we shared the bid with you. And shockingly, we had one company bid on the job.
Totally new company, right?
As it has been for, probably 30 years, maybe more. So we have that transportation bid. I think the good news is that the last time we did this, the increase to that fiscal year was close to $100,000. This year it's under $1,000 at about under $700 actually. So we've seen a dramatic decrease in some of that, as we kind of characterize as gouging. I think it's really a much more appropriate number in terms of the budget, in terms of the transportation bid for this year. Michael can go into any detail that you have. I know in your materials you had the actual transportation sheet in which we had 19 buses and we had one minibus and then 2 kindergarten runs. So that's kind of our fleet going forward. Michael, you want to add anything in terms of what you feel?
I just think that we did, I should say, we had three companies that were interested in the contract, but only one actually submitted a bid for this contract. It is a 3-year contract. We will have the option to extend just as we did the last contract, and we can go out to bid at any time after the 3rd year. So we can go out in the 3rd year, the 4th year, the 5th year, depending on what the market looks like. I think that this is a fair contract for the next 3 years. And like Dr. Marsden said, next year's increase is under $700, but for a 3-year, if you look at the 3-year increase, it's slightly over $90,000, which is much less than the last bid that we received about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Actually, like 4 years ago.
Okay, so Dr. Marsden and Michael, are you, first of all, I want to open it to the committee. Does anybody have any questions specifically about the transportation bid? I know that we have gone over the bid process ad nauseum over the years, but you are certainly welcome to put your 2 cents in there.
Yeah, just a question. I know we're supposed to be level funded, or but I can also realize that in years past we have talked about adding an afternoon bus for after extracurriculars. Well, it's probably not going to happen, but I don't know. Have you broached that with the bus company? Do we have rough numbers at all? Or
Yeah, I can give you the rough numbers. They are, it would be $383 per day, so approximately for 180 days. So that would be the cost to add a bus to the contract. I can, let me just quickly do the math. So it's an additional $69,000.
Would that be able to be covered, say, if people bought into the after-school bus, made it sort of like made a bus pass for the after-school, solely for the after-school bus?
If they want an after-school bus, fee is fine. I'm not going to argue with you, but
if this is our chance to get it into the contract, then I think it's.
Well, we can always add another bus, right?
You can, well, this would be an extra run, not an extra
anytime.
An extra run, yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Just
So
as
I
long
don't
as
think
the
that
window is still open.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note too, if we do this in the future for next year, they don't do door-to-door service with that, so it would have to be specific stops along the way in certain neighborhoods or certain sections of town in which they would drop the kids off. So that's.
I think people understand that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I'm not sure, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do think, we should just put a pin in that, because I do think it is an important element, building equity, encouraging, there are a lot of working parents. Anyways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it has been there are so many things that we talk about that are long-term goals, and this may be an easy shift in a different financial year, or maybe not. We'll see.
But this is also something that we could do if, number one, you could charge a fee, like you had said, with the bus passes. But, if we get additional stimulus money, that might be something that we could use it for. I mean, I think it's something that I know parents have asked for. I mean, there's some pretty compelling arguments out there from parents and kids that aren't able to stay after school for either an activity or additional help or intramurals or something like that because they don't have a ride. So this, to me, that makes sense that we could do that if we get the additional funding.
Good.
And we could also run the numbers too of what it would be for a bus pass, for a student to offset those costs. I mean, again, I know I bring this up every year, but if we were to do a bus fee for general busing, those are the kind of the things you can offset with those bus fees, things like this. Exactly. These are the extras that you can get.
Yeah. Don't give me the squint. I'm not completely opposed to it. We need to talk about it. And I don't, every year it is worthy of having a discussion.
It definitely is.
I think it's a good idea.
Sure.
I didn't say it was going to be discussed now. I just said it's worthy.
Let's put that on the agenda at some point.
Absolutely.
Let's put that on the agenda sometime.
That should be part of the process this year.
Yeah, Mike always runs some numbers, and and I just think.
Can we just get the numbers, Mike, from Jeff from the bus company?
Well, we have the numbers.
All right. It's per run and per day.
Yeah. So what?
If we charged a fee.
Yeah. What we'll do is we'll see. We'll do a quick survey to see which high school and middle school kids are interested in a light bus, and then from there, we'll just look at what a fee would be and what the cost would be. So I can work with Nat Vaughn and Mr. Parga on just doing a quick survey.
No, but would that go down to maybe even Dale? Because I know Dale has a lot of intramurals and different things that.
So that would be so for the middle school, high school would be one run. Dale Street would be a second run.
Okay, I
You
see.
could use the same bus, but it would be a separate run.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to, these are all really worthy and they're starred for conversations later, but it is getting late. It is 9 o'clock and we have many more things to get through. So
do we, Jess, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. The agenda just said potential vote. Is there anything we need to do around this contract?
we do need to vote it. It's just that I don't ever say that we vote simply because I don't want to guarantee that we are voting. It seems to paint us into a corner. If we would choose as a committee to accept this bid, then we would need to vote for it, right? Okay.
Well, I mean, my own view is unless it's going to change, I don't see why we wouldn't vote for it now.
Sounds good to me.
I would say the motion would be around accepting the bus contract for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
With the option of 2 additional years there. So we have that all in the motion.
Written out right here. So I will now, if the committee feels as though this discussion is over, I do need to, according to our policy, see if there is anybody who has a comment about the buses or anything that they would like to contribute to this discussion as a comment or a reflection.
Too late to request the buses be painted Medfield blue.
Yes.
Yes. I don't even need to discuss that. All right.
Need to be on the agenda.
Safely out of the need to discuss the buses. All right. So do I have a motion to accept the transportation bid from Michael J. Connolly Bus Company for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024, with the option to extend for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025, as presented to the committee by Dr. Marston?
So moved.
And I may.
Wait, Jeff is saying something, but you're muted.
Sorry,
Am I wrong?
it would be FY25, FY26
Thank you.
for the
Thank you
extension.
very much. All right, I'm going to say that again. Do we have a motion to accept the transportation bid from Michael J. Connolly for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024, with the option to extend for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026, as presented to the committee by Dr. Marston?
So moved.
Anna Mae so moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, remember, we do have to do roll call. So a roll call involves you actually have to say your name. So voting, and why don't we start with Anna Mae?
Anna Mae, yes.
Okay, Tim?
Tim Knight, yes.
Megan Glenn?
Megan Glenn, yes.
All right, and Leo?
Leo Brem, yes.
Okay, Jessica Riley, yes, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank
The
you.
wheels on the bus continue to go around. All right, do we have other items under new business since posting on December 15th?
I do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move on to old business. And this is the superintendent's mid-cycle formative review. And just as a introduction, in November 2019, the committee and Dr. Marsden chose to take advantage of a pilot program through DESE that uses a 2-year cycle on which to evaluate superintendent's goals for the district and the superintendent's performance. Tonight is the midpoint or formative evaluation of that, which consists of Dr. Marsden presenting his goals and progress towards achieving them, and then how we may then have a discussion about the goals and the progress. And as I look at this, I just want to say that it's unfortunately necessary to say that last year when we presented these goals, none of us had any idea that barely 3 months later, we would be changing everything we do, every way we do it, and our expectations about what a normal day in the world looks like would have to completely change. Nor did we know how long that would go on. So with that being said, I would hand the floor over to Dr. Marston to present to us his goals and his perspective on achievement or kind of progress towards those.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as you know that we're required to have student learning goals, professional practice goals, and then district improvement. So I'll go through each one of those and then give you some of the highlights. I won't go through everything that's in your materials because we'll be here another hour, but I would just want to go through some of the important pieces that I think are, important as progress towards the goals. As you said, these 2-year goals. So from 1920 and then 2021 are for those school years. So the first goal around student learning, and again, this needs to be data driven around the student learning goal with data backup. So all of these are reflected in our strategic plan and are aligned with our strategic plan, which is what our teachers do as well. So goal number 1 was to collaborate with school committee administration, staff, and community to move forward SEL indicators district-wide, focus on reducing the number of student self-reporting issues of mental health and substance abuse on the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey, as well as data from SOS, which is Signs of Suicide and Interface. So if you remember at the meeting last year, I did not have that last part in there, and you recommended that I add that the data pieces in there around Metro West, SOS, and Interface. So I think, one of the things I want to highlight there is the SEL task force, which is beginning to meet again in January. So we had key topics in the SEL task force that we were looking at. Staff and student wellness was an area that we were working on, parent engagement, school start time, school schedules, and SEL curriculum K-12. So if you remember, we had subcommittees and groups that worked on that, and we've made some great progress in that area, and we continue to do that. When we get back together in January, we're going to look at some of the focus that we did last year, but also how can we support students and families and teachers going forward, given the current state that we're in right now. So we had that particular piece. Challenge success was also a part of that, working with the students and the faculty of the middle school and high school on that. Medfield Talks, which we had a great Medfield Talks last night with Kim Price and Naja Riley, but we really focused on building resiliency in students with Jim McCauley in November, and then the importance of sleep with Dr. Judith Owens, which, that the piece with Dr. Judith Owens really tied into the SEL task force. We're looking at school schedules and school starting times and how that benefits students, especially the high school level with a later starter time. And then looked at, certainly going to use the data from the Metro West Health Survey, the new MCAP survey. So MCAP developed a survey that they administered to our students. SOS, which is Signs of Suicide, Interface, and the final report. One of the things that we didn't know is that, as Jess had said, that we would have a pandemic shortly after these goals, and it's this particular goal is critical because we're starting to see, obviously, statewide and across the country, issues around mental health with the pandemic for both, certainly kids and adults, but also looking at remote learning, hybrid models, those kinds of things. It's no secret that that's creating challenges for both students and families. So I think this is a critical one, and one that we'll have a lot more data on at this time next year once I do the final and you do the summative report on that. So looking at professional practice, again, this came out of alignment with our strategic plan, which is goal number 5, strategy 4.1.1 and 4.1.2. So this particular goal was work on all aspects of the Dale Street project, including securing project funds, active member of the school building committee, management of communication with the OPM, architect instruction, and meeting all the MSBA timelines. So those really important piece and something that is obviously we've taken up a lot of our time as a school district. So working as a member of the school building committee, work with the school building committee, the OPM, our owner's project manager in Arrow Street to complete the PDP. Attended 36 working group meetings on Mondays with that particular group. presented at and attended 31 public meetings related to the Dale Street project. And I attached that on there, all the dates and times and where those were located. If you remember the good times when we had them in person, and then a lot of them are in webinar format. So just to give you some data points there as well. District improvement, I really tried to look at 3 separate areas in district improvement to focus on. This first one is comes under goal number 1 of our strategic plan, strategy 4.1.1. And we had this in place, and the pandemic really put a damper on this particular one. Pilot 2 elementary schools focused on project-based learning, provide teachers and principals support with training, planning time, and a separate budget to make the program successful. So we identified a pilot school, which was Dale Street, had several meetings with Principal Steve Grenham to try to plan this out. He met with teachers, and we identified 2 teachers that were going to conduct the pilot for this school year, the 2020-2021 school year. Obviously, that didn't happen based on everything that happened from March on. We scheduled teacher training in the spring, and we canceled that due to the pandemic. And the plan right now is to try that for the next school year. So we thought that was a really important goal to have, because we know the importance of project-based learning. And if we could have 2 particular pilot classrooms that really developed all their curricula around that and provided students those opportunities, it would be a great thing for us to study and look at. So that, and then expand if we thought that it was beneficial for all of our kids. Unfortunately, we got to the point where we're ready to start, and we're going to try to do that again next year. The next goal number 4 for district improvement, comes under goal number 2 of our strategic plan. Collaborate with leadership team to expand cultural proficiency in classrooms and curricula pre-K to 12. So we've done a lot of work with this, and obviously a lot of work ahead. I know that when we had meetings over the summer and in June, we've talked about some of these issues, not only in Medfield, but across the country. So I just want to highlight a couple of things on here. The Civil Rights Self-Evaluation Committee, which I know a couple of you were a part of. We are in year 2 of that, and year 3 is coming up next year. That's a really important piece of self-evaluation to see where you are as a school district around your policies, your practices, and your day-to-day operation around civil rights. The district developed the Medfield model for evaluation of bias in content and instructional materials. So that all staff were trained on that in the spring of 19, and we're going to roll that out. We're going to be continuing that process as we add new curriculum to our district, and we use that to support the new curriculum for civics. So it's just taking another lens and looking at curriculum before we develop, purchase, and share it with kids to make sure that it's free of bias in the content, and it's really a good process that I think has been beneficial to our district and our kids. Certainly, we have focused on anti-racism and becoming active anti-racism instead of a passive model. So really trying to be aggressive around that and having those tough conversations. Started with some book groups that Nat did at Blake, and we moved to a district-wide book group in the summer of 2020. And as you know, that was a focus of our opening, and every teacher also got the book that came out of that from. So that's a really important, how to be active anti-racist. So Medfield Educators for Racial Justice, a group of educators that have been doing some of this work, have gotten together, and they've worked really hard on this. They meet monthly. I've only attended a couple of their meetings, but they've done a great job, and they're starting to develop curriculum and lessons that they're implementing in the classroom. So that's been an important step in that direction as well. And when we had our professional development in September, we used the Hometown Weekly article and also the video that I shared with you of my former professor around racism, use that as a kickoff to a discussion point around race and how it plays into instruction learning in our own personal lives and in the town of Medfield and the schools. And it was a really rich conversation that we're so proud of the work our teachers did with that. It's not an easy conversation, and people took risks and were really honest and it did a great job. So that was something that we worked on. We had Native American consultants work with our elementary teachers, and that was going to be a series of professional development that got cut short by the pandemic as well. And then we had cultural proficiency professional development, a full day as part of our annual administrative retreat, but unfortunately that was canceled as well. So that's good on the docket for next year and something that we'll be working on. But definitely it became a focus of the district, and we continue to work in that really important piece of of what we're doing. So the last goal, goal 5, which is under goal number 3, strategy from our strategic plan, complete the new strategic plan process that will result in a 5-year strategic plan for the district. That item is in the FY22 budget, as you saw in the initial budget presentation. And, we'll have to talk about this as we get closer, but we know that that process that we did was so important last time, engaging the entire community, engaging our teachers, engaging our staff members, our parents. We did surveys, we did focus groups. It was really powerful for us, and it really led to the work we've been doing over the last 5 years. And we look forward to doing that again, building on some of the successes we've had in the last 5 years, but also improving and going in different directions of areas that we think are important to improve for our students and for our families. So we'll look at that again, and we can discuss how we'll do that, what kind of consultant, the process, all of that, but it is in the FY22 budget, which I would assume that is something that you folks would want to stay in there as well. Other items that weren't formalized goals, but just to kind of put out there, worked with the parents and the town officials to organize the rolling rally for our class of 2020, which was a great success and really one of the best days I've had as an educator. That rolling rally was incredible. Provided numerous COVID-19 updates for all families. We're up to 46 right now on those. Just trying to get the word out. There'll be a 47 at some point tonight or tomorrow, that more information that I need to get out to families as well. Negotiated those MOAs, one in the spring and one in the fall, and we'll be negotiating again coming up real soon. Continue to partner with beginning years to establish that the daycare for our staff, which is just really important. I think you all know that was a focus for me to try to get that done. And it's something that I had when I was a principal many years ago and my kids were little, had the benefit. And I think it's really important that we should, create that benefit for all of our teachers if they need it. It allows us to really retain our quality teachers and puts a little stress out of their lives when they know their child is either in the building they're at or pretty darn close to it. The work of Medfield Talks has been amazing, working with those individuals that represent all the great community organizations and really, trying to get focused on different areas that are important for us to talk about as a community and certainly as parents. And I know that last night was really something special. So I can't thank the folks that volunteer for that group enough for the hard work that they do. As you know, I serve on the board of directors for both the Accept and the Tech Collaborative, serve as the co-president of the Tri-County Superintendent's Roundtable, appointed to the Mass Association of School Superintendents Executive Committee. I am the representative for the Mass Association of School Superintendents on the MIAA Statewide Football Committee. Was appointed last year to the board of directors of SEEDS, which is a nonprofit science education company based out of Medfield. I just think it's important to kind of represent the community beyond just, looking at the day-to-day work, but, getting Medfield's name out there in all these different areas and on statewide committees, et cetera. So the executive piece was really, the executive board piece was really important this summer as we had, firsthand conversations with the commissioner constantly as we plan for this reopening process of schools in the fall of 2020. So that was a really important thing, but something I feel like it was important for our community and our district to be a part of. So that quick overview of where we are in the status report. I know that when we do the summative next year at this time, there'll be much more data, much more information, and hopefully farther along on some of these than we are right now, because we'll be back to normal. But that's all I have, Madam Chair.
I'm going to open this to the committee. If anyone has questions, comments, any concerns, Megan, hit it.
It's hard to believe that we had any goals at any point that weren't related to getting our kids back into the schools. But that being said, I know that we had discussed again, pre-COVID meetings at some point. I remember talking about it being helpful to maybe link some of these specific goals to agenda items as we go throughout the year.
Right.
So that way, or creating maybe even like a Google Doc where information is stored in there, so it's easier when we come to the summative part of the evaluation.
Right.
So it's more of just a suggestion instead of.
No, that's, and I think Anna May suggested that before, that we should be having we did it years ago, I think when Chris
Right.
Morrison was chair, that he wanted something like that, so that on the agenda, there was a number which was tied back to any of my goals that were there, so that when you guys were doing the summative, you could just look back at all those materials and it was easy.
Right.
So we can certainly do that. I apologize, anyway. I remember you brought that up before.
No, it's okay. And then my only other point was, do you feel like there are any of these goals that maybe have kind of become unrealistic due to the situation we find ourselves in, either budgetary wise or, I mean, for the project based, do you feel like that's a realistic idea that it could happen next year? Okay.
I do, yeah, because I think if you look at it, you already have the teachers on board. They're already built into the budget. It would really just be looking at either grant funding to get additional supplies that they may need, and also allocating some of the funds out of FY21 for the training. But
Okay.
I think it's possible.
Okay. All right.
Just to answer the rest of your question, I think that given on goal number one, given the state of the world right now in terms of what we're seeing with anxiety and depression around the world and everywhere, that I can focus on reducing the numbers of students self-reporting and the interface, but I know for a fact those numbers are all going to be higher.
Oh, yeah.
So there's no question about that.
Will those surveys still be taken? That we're
Yeah,
gonna
so we did SOS recently, that we do
Right.
that in the fall, so that was done. The MCAP survey is new this year, so that was based on the Metro West, but a truncated version of it, so that MCAP could get and youth outreach could get, outreach could get additional information. Because the nice thing about, the good thing about that is they get it right away, whereas Metro West, they take it in the fall and then we have to wait till the spring for it. So
Right.
this was an effort by Kathy to really try to get the information right away and start working on some of these issues, which, I fully supported that.
Great. Okay.
Is
you.
the Metro West survey going to be administered this year at all? This is an administration year, right?
Yeah,
That's
I've gotten a
awesome.
few emails on it, and I something's telling me that it's canceled, but I need to I have to review that. I think it was being postponed because of everything. So,
Right.
So
Right.
that
Right.
goal may have to be tweaked a tad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only we just have to be realistic about that. That's just not.
Yep.
But I know that. Oh, go ahead, Tim, please.
Well, just following up, because Megan, you were saying, might there be anything that may be difficult? I also was looking at, I think the evaluation guide, it said, should there need to be time to adjust the goals for any reason,
Right.
this would be the time to do so. Thinking about the pandemic, is there anything that would be additive? That you're saying, hey, look, I'm spending an awful lot of time doing X. That we just was not on the table
Yeah.
last year. I'll say this,
Yeah, Tim.
potentially, Jeff, it doesn't need to be answered tonight, but that might be something to consider. I mean, there's been a massive amount of time there, and we all know the work is not done.
Right.
Right. So, that was the one comment I had, and Jess, I shared that with you. I'm not sure how, if that ever happens, but that would be that was one of the comments I had.
Thank you, Tim.
Anime or Leo?
Yeah, it's astounding, really, what I want to say. And I know there are folks who are not happy. And I think you stated that over the summer, that most people aren't going to be happy about the state of affairs we are in right now. But I just want to express gratitude. This hasn't been easy, and but you focused a lot on the SEL, and I personally appreciate that. And even you stating during the budget, when I asked the question, the what if, what else could we have, so I think being in tuned to the students' needs, the families' needs at that emotional and mental health level is so critical. And I just want to say thank you for acknowledging that, and thank you for focusing on that, you know, with Nadia last night and the SOS. You know, we had as a 7th grade parent, we had the info session last week. And I sent an email to Stephanie and to Matt just saying, thank you for keeping this on the radar. You know, it would have been a very easy thing to say, let's push it aside. You know, we just don't have the bandwidth for this, but it is so critical that we stay on top of this. And if we can find the money to bring in another adjustment counselor to help Russ, that would be a godsend, because there's a great need.
So I know there was a Q&A that came up from Kathy McDonald saying, correct, it is pushed out to the spring. So I wasn't hallucinating. Okay.
All right. Leo?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the conversation, but I'll echo everyone's comments, and it's been an incredible year, and obviously we've all had to work together in more intensely, you know, to you know, take on the challenges of this year. So and obviously you and Michael and your team have been extremely dedicated to this process. Yeah, so I guess I don't want to keep repeating everything that was said. I just really appreciate it, and I know I've told you all personally, but publicly I want to say I also appreciate everyone's professionalism and continuing to even counsel us when we start getting off the rails. So yeah, I think that, you know, we're gonna look forward, and that was a great list of things that you just mentioned around your goals that were, like Megan said, it was exciting to hear that that's kind of the normal stuff that we'd like to get back to as soon as possible. I really appreciate that, and keeping that eye on the prize, you know, that we can actually get back to that again.
Thanks.
So.
I think that my most specific comment is the fact that our children have been in school for any period of time during the week for the last 3 months is not something that many school districts can say. And the fact that you, despite what, you know, some people may say, the fact that I have never heard you say, I think this is just it, that I've never heard you say, okay, this is our resting point and we're done, but you're always keeping, in my opinion, our students at the very forefront of what you do. And sometimes that can ruffle people's feathers. And I've heard you say it before, and I've heard you say it for years, that kids are first, and we work towards what's the best thing for our student learners. And I have to say that if we were to write an entire strategic plan around that, you have made that goal. We will never be completely satisfied. That's not who we are, and we shouldn't be. But the fact that we continue to push forward, and that you have guided us in that as a committee, as your staff, as your administration, is, and that you have been unrelenting in that, really makes me very proud to be part of our school district and our committee. I think that we need to continue to focus on SEL, and it is clear that you think so as well. And that I also appreciate that you have kept the long-term goals of being aware of our internal biases, and that they will always need evaluation, and that no community stays the same, and that you have been able to hold those long-term goals in mind in the midst of what is truly just unthinkable 9 months ago. So thank you. And I very much appreciate it. And I hope that I speak, or I think I can speak as our committee for that as well. We will continue to discuss these goals. Obviously, we kind of all individually speak to you about them all the time in the conversations that we have with you in our regular communications. I do think that you and I had spoken about moving the date of this summative evaluation to kind of late summer so that you can line up your goals and we can line up our evaluations more closely with the school year and kind of make more of a natural transition from school year to school year and to have it more kind of in line with your contract times. So if you continue to feel okay about that, I think we'll meet back here next August in terms of the summative goals. Okay.
I mean, I thank you. I appreciate the feedback. And I just want to say that it's, I'm blessed to have a really good team of people that work super hard and a great group of teachers and teaching assistants and custodians and cafeteria workers and you name it. Medfield is blessed to have that, and everyone has kids in the forefront, and that's what we think is, the most important thing. That's why we have jobs, and that's what we try to work for. So, appreciate the feedback, but it really is, a zillion people working at it every day to try to make it work.
Appreciated and understood, but we also perhaps are in a unique position to see what happens on a day-to-day basis that I think sometimes other people are not able to. So, thank you. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to say? Anyone?
You're here. Nice work.
Yes. All right. With that, we will take public comment. If anybody would like to raise their hand and come over on video. Remember that this is not a dialogue, that this is comment. And that this is a formative assessment that we are pausing mid-cycle to see where we are. And all right. I think that we can move on to the next agenda item, which actually I am going to, with the permission of the rest of the committee, postpone the mascot task force update. I'll do a brief blip perhaps at the end, but I don't want to take up any more time from kind of more important larger issues. The task, well, I'll do it right now. How's that? The mascot task force update. We are just about to release essentially an application for our for the seats on the committee or for the task force, and that will be coming out within the next few days. So an announcement about kind of the school committee's role in changing the logo and then what our next steps are. And we'll go from there. All right. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about that quickly?
Is an email going to be sent out to all the students? Okay.
Students and staff, parents. We're also going to publicize through different networks in town, and we'll put it in the patch. We'll put it in, and really hope to get community feedback on that as well. And I have some outreach I need to do with certain people, but I feel like we are back on track.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jess.
Absolutely. Any public comment about that? I want to make sure I'm crossing my I's and dotting my T's. All right. The next thing we need to talk about is the Dale Street project update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that we have not a lot of updates since the last meeting, but we're planning on submitting our PSR tomorrow, but that has been changed. We need to have another SBC meeting just to correct a few forms that were in there. There was a couple of clerical errors, I think, on minutes and a couple other things. So we need to kind of correct those, revote those, and make sure that everything is all set to send into MSBA. So that's the biggest thing that we've been working on right now. I know that the sustainability group met today. So I know here probably Tuesday night how that went, and Anna Mae, I believe the communications met yesterday, or was that today as well?
Today,
Okay.
yes. So just a couple of things I want to add. The Wheelock Neighborhood Traffic Questionnaire has been released. It's posted on the school website, the town website. It's going to be posted on the patch, an announcement in this week's Hometown Weekly. And so we're getting it out through channels. It's not just for the Wheelock neighborhood, but it's open. But these are just other data points to look at, and specifically to find mitigation solutions. And also, we have a training from the Office of Campaign and Political Finance. Sometimes there's that gray spot between advocacy and then education and engagement. We're clearly in the education and engagement lane, and we can't veer. So we're going to have someone coming in to do a training for the committee. And that's going to happen on January 12th. And that's it on our front.
And May, that's a really interesting topic. Is that open to, if any of us were to want to have the kind of general information, would that be open to us, or is it very specific to your group?
No, you know what? I asked him who we could invite. He said it's open to everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So January 12th, 10 a.m.
Okay. So if that is the full update at this point, we move on to donations.
I have a couple donations here.
Sorry, actually, Dr. Marston, I just want to see if there's any public comments specifically about the school committee's role in the Dale Street project. I apologize.
Okay, sorry.
Because while this is not necessarily in our hands at this point, it is a town project. Just by virtue of having the update, we want to make sure.
Just as you wait on their, what's the new target date for the PSR submission?
It needs to be in by the 28th of December.
Okay.
So before that.
All right. So it appears as though nobody is going to choose to comment. So we will move on to the next agenda item, which is donations. Dr. Marston.
Right. I'd ask that you approve the following donations. $100 Amazon gift card from the Teeny family to the Blake Theater Department. $50 from the LaRoe family to the Blake Theater Department. $100 anonymous donation to the Blake Theater Department, $225 from the Blake PTO Pathfinders grant to the Blake gift account, $528.59 from the Memorial PTO to the Memorial gift account for recess equipment bags. I ask you to approve as presented.
So
Is
moved.
there a motion to accept donations as presented by Dr. Marston?
So moved.
Leo, do I have a second?
Second, Anna Mae.
Second, Anna Mae, and again, a roll call. We'll start with you, Leo.
Leo Brem, yes.
Anna Mae O'Shea, Brooke.
Anna Mae O'Shea Brooke, yes.
All right, Tim.
Tim Knight, yes.
Megan.
Megan Glenn, yes.
And Jessica Riley, yes. And the motion passes. Next on the agenda is if anybody has informational items.
I have one, Madam Chair, which we could have brought up during Dale Street, but I put it in your packet as an information item. You have a letter that I received this week from the Massachusetts Historical Commission regarding the project notification form that was sent by Arrow Street. So essentially, it looks like they're going to ask us to do some sort of archaeological survey and dig on that site at some point in the spring, the building site. So it's in your packet to take a look at it. To see if there are any Native American artifacts, I would assume, on that site. So I know we've talked about it at the SBC, but I wanted to make sure you folks are all in the loop as well.
Now, that's part of the evaluation process of the site anyway. Is this an enhanced kind of assessment of the site?
It appears so, yes.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to, if they're going to be over there anyway, Jeff, it might be a great opportunity for a curriculum activity, to get students involved, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
we rid the site of any artifacts. Now, if they find a dinosaur, though, it's definitely going in the lobby of the school. So.
I'll put you in charge of that, Leo.
Dinosaur committee.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things I always think of whenever I see a sticker on the back of somebody's car that says Medfield established 1631 or 50 or whatever it is, I think, yeah, I'm not pretty sure. There were people and nations here far before that. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to see who was here and appreciate their role in our history as well. It didn't all start in the 1600s. So, okay. Any more informational items? Anyone?
Want to thank Andrew for his candid feedback about MCAS.
You're welcome.
And for not being a shrinking violet when it comes to adding your input.
That's right.
All right. Future agenda items. We will continue with student feedback, like Andrew, and like our student council, our student government representatives, and social emotional learning, which we'll probably have Dr. Worthy here to in the early winter, and I also would say that we would have Dr. Power back for a longer period of time and with a different schedule to really talk about where we are mid-year.
Sure.
All right.
Sorry, just quick question. I
Yeah.
noticed our future agenda items are much smaller. So are you just parsing it out according to the upcoming months versus that laundry list?
Yeah, we had a laundry list that we were just kind of peeling through and just continuing to push forward. And some of them we had actually covered. So just in looking at the agenda items, and if there are things that you want to put on for the future agenda items, I encourage us to list them, but I'd also like to list them as per month so that we know kind of where we're going.
Okay, because
Yeah.
as you mentioned, after Dr. Power presented regarding the assessment, the standard-based
Mhm.
reporting, that would be great to.
Right, exactly. And in fact, I took that off because I simply did not want to keep on kicking it down the road until we actually had a date for it. So we'll put that on for conceivably February, Jeff? Okay.
Can't hear you.
Sorry, we're looking at February, March. Sorry, I was muted.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. And so our next scheduled meeting would be on January 7th of 2021. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Usually a little faster on the uptake there with that one, Leo. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. And Anime,
Anime, aye.
Tim,
Tim Knight, yes.
Megan,
Megan Glenn, yes.
and Leo,
Leo Brem, affirmative.
and Jessica Riley. Aye. The meeting is closed at
Night.
9:40.
Midnight.
Night, folks.
Night all. Thank you very much.
Here.
And as always, if you have comments that
Thank
you
you.
didn't share,
Thank you. Good night.
Goodbye.
Wow.
please email us. Thanks. Bye-bye.